On our newscast tonight, the members of a special inter-Korean committee that will manage the Gaeseong Industrial Complex holds its first meeting, but remains divided on the details. They'll head back to the negotiating table next week. The international community would like to see the six-party talks on North Korea's denuclearization resume. And according to experts, that day may be right around the corner, as recent signals from the North show it is ready and willing to come to the discussion table. Enigmatic former NBA star Dennis Rodman is no stranger to North Korea and is prepping for another visit to Pyongyang. Rodman says he's simply going to visit his friend Kim Jong-un and has no intention of discussing the Kenneth Bae issue. Stick with us for these stories and more.
It is 11 a.m. in Paris, 2 a.m. in San Francisco, and 6 on a Tuesday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Kim Hyun-ji.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us. No confirmation on the official resumption date for the Joint Industrial Complex. That's our starting point for today.
That's right. At the inaugural meeting of the Joint Committee overseeing the management of the shuttered Gaeseong Industrial Complex, the two Koreas failed to set a date for the resumption of business operations there.
However, they did agree to continue their negotiations in the coming days. Our Ao Jin-ju has the details.
The two Koreas on Monday have failed to agree on when to resume operations at the Gaeseong Industrial Complex in their first meeting of a joint committee set up for better management of the business park. Instead, the two sides decided to hold the committee's second meeting next Tuesday on the 10th to settle a date to resume business at the complex. The issue is what dragged the meeting out, which lasted for more than 12 hours. While the North wants business at the park to restart as soon as possible, South Korea has taken a rather cautious stance. A government official in Seoul explained that the South Korean government wants to set up regulatory measures and restore the military hotline in the West Sea before the resumption of operations to prevent another abrupt shutdown of the complex in the future. The two Koreas promised to carry on with discussions within the four divisions set up under the committee before the next committee meeting to come up with ways to strengthen business regulations and normalize the complex. The divisions of investment protection and global competitiveness are scheduled to meet on Wednesday, while the divisions in charge of the entry and exit of South Korean workers and communications will meet on Thursday. Experts predict should talks within these divisions go well, the two Koreas will likely be able to agree on a specific date to restart operations at the park in their next committee meeting. The two sides will also continue negotiations on how to compensate the losses of South Korean companies during the sudden closure of the complex earlier this year. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
Will the long-stalled multilateral dialogue on North Korea's nuclear issue resume anytime soon? According to several North Korea experts around the world, the answer just might be yes. Our Han Da-eun tells us more.
The recent resurgence of inter-Korean talks on several pending issues has warmed up the chill that gripped the Korean peninsula earlier this year. And with hints from Pyongyang that the reclusive state might be willing to re-engage in dialogue with regional neighbors, experts across the globe are bullish on the possible resumption of the stalled six-party nuclear talks. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Monday raised hopes that a political process leading to North Korea's denuclearization would unfold soon. Lavrov pointed out that recent signals from the North show it's ready to follow through on the agreements made by the six-party members in 2005. North Korea expert and former U.S. State Department official Joel Witt echoed that sentiment. He says there has been a positive change in the North's priorities, adding that the communist state has barely mentioned anything about its nuclear power in recent public announcements. North Korea had previously made very clear to the world that it was pushing for economic growth and an expansion of its nuclear program. According to Witt, the change in policy to prioritize economic development was most evident in an announcement made by Pyongyang's National Defense Commission on June 16th. Against such a backdrop, the U.S. expert stressed that it's important for Washington to open dialogue with the North now. China, North Korea's longtime ally, has also expressed hope towards reopening the nuclear talks. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman officially announced this week that China's top nuclear envoy, Wu Da-wei, exchanged views on a resumption of the denuclearization talks with his North Korean counterparts during a visit to Pyongyang last week. 한다은, Arirang News.
Former NBA star Dennis Rodman is heading to North Korea for another meeting with leader Kim Jong-un. In a telephone interview with Reuters before leaving Beijing for Pyongyang on Tuesday, Rodman said the 5-day visit is simply, quote, another basketball diplomacy tour. Despite speculation that he may lobby Kim for the release of U.S. citizen Kenneth Bae, who is imprisoned in the north, Rodman said he had no plans to bring the issue up. The trip will be Rodman's second to Pyongyang this year and comes at a sensitive time. North Korea late last week canceled at the last minute a visit to Pyongyang by U.S. Special Envoy on North Korean human rights issues, Robert King.
Despite the United States' planned tapering of its monetary stimulus program and speculations about an economic crisis in emerging countries, the Korean market remains fairly stable. Recent data also shows that Korea's market capitalization has overtaken that of nations like Brazil, Russia, and India. Our new reporter Kwon So-ah has the details.
Stock market remains relatively strong despite a planned pullback in the United States quantitative easing program and rumors of another financial crisis in emerging markets. The aggregate market value of listed companies in Korea came to $1.1 trillion as of Sunday, according to data compiled by Bloomberg. This figure puts Korea in 11th place among 87 countries surveyed, after the US, Japan, Britain, and China. Although Korea failed to reach its record high of $1.2 trillion posted earlier in the year, it seems to be weathering the economic storms better than others. Korea's market capitalization fell to $960 billion in June on reports that the U.S. Federal Reserve would begin tapering its huge monetary stimulus program. However, it topped the $1 trillion mark again last month. The stock markets of the BRIC nations of Brazil, Russia, India, and China, meanwhile, have performed relatively poorly. With the exception of China, which is the world's second largest economy, Brazil, Russia, and India have all given way to Korea. Experts say that Korea is now being considered a favorable market for its track record of fast recovery during crises and strength in its basic economic fundamentals. Currently, the global market capitalization stands at $54.6 trillion. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Possibly a new chapter for the once forgotten Nokia. Microsoft has struck a $7 billion deal to buy Nokia's struggling mobile phone business, a bold move that's being interpreted as an attempt to catch up with the fast-growing mobile market. As part of the deal that is likely to be finalized in early 2014, Nokia will also license its patents to Microsoft, and about 32,000 Nokia employees will transfer over, including Nokia CEO Stephen Elop. Elop is believed to be among the top contenders to succeed current Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer, who announced last month that he was retiring.
There is less of a rush to the altar for Koreans these days, and that poses a unique set of problems for a country dealing with a low birth rate. A recent paper published by the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs shows that nearly 24% of 20-somethings in the country are likely to stay single for the rest of their lives. That's the current trend, and the research shows that a majority of people who are still single on their 45th birthday will stay that way for the rest of their lives. The average age for a Korean man to get hitched for the first time has risen from 28 to 32 over the past 15 years, and the average has also risen for women from 26 to 29. The paper says more and more Koreans are shunning or delaying marriage because the social pressures to get married before a certain age are fading. The wildfire that erupted 2 weeks ago, scorching hundreds of thousands of acres of forest in California, has subsided, although a complete containment of the blaze may still be weeks away. Our Son Jang-in brings us the latest on the progress of the fire.
U.S. firefighters are still battling the massive fire that has ripped through a stretch of Yosemite National Park. With the help of over 5,000 crews deployed to tackle the blaze, firefighters made major gains overnight. Officials said early Monday that the fire that erupted on August 17th was now 60% contained, a 15% increase from the day before. However, fire analysts estimate that it could be sometime around September 20th before the fire is fully extinguished, as a 2-week-old rim fire is still growing. So far, the blaze has covered some 920 square kilometers or 350 square miles. Officials also say the current precipitation in the air is expected to slow the flames from advancing further. The U.S. Forest Service says the cause of the fire still remains under investigation, with any findings on the matter yet to be released. The fire is deemed the 4th largest in California's history. The biggest was the Cedar Fire in San Diego County in 2003, which ripped through some 1,130 square kilometers of land and destroyed roughly 2,800 buildings, leaving 14 people dead. Meanwhile, the dense smoke covering Yosemite's views has begun to lift, and people are again able to enjoy the park despite air quality warnings that are still in effect. Son Jang-in, Arirang News.
It's not every day that young conductors are given the reins to the Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra, but that's precisely what happened to 6 very lucky individuals recently. They also got a chance to learn from one of the best conductors in the world. Our cultural correspondent Park Ji-won tells us more.
33-year-old Choi Soo-yeol is one of Korea's most promising young conductors, as proven through world competitions over the past few years. Now he's conducting Brahms Symphony No. 1 with members of the Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra. This is part of a conducting masterclass offered by Maestro Jang Myung-hoon, and Choi was one of the 6 conductors selected.
Of course, there must have been parts where it wasn't good enough, but I tried my best for the given 30 minutes to deliver the essence of Brahms that I interpreted.
It wasn't just aspiring Korean conductors taking part. One international participant also got a chance to learn from Maestro Jang.
I have heard this orchestra in a couple concerts before, and I'm very looking forward to work with them before I came all the way to Korea. And of course, we've get a chance to meet Maestro, and it's a great honor because I heard a lot about him. I've seen many of his concerts, but it's my first time I actually get to meet him.
The 6 participating conductors, all in their early to mid-30s, were recommended and selected because of their outstanding talents. However, from the perspective of Maestro Jang, they all have room to improve. From postures to the mindset of approaching the music, the 60-year-old shared his wisdom and personal anecdotes about how to draw the best sound by gathering the force of the orchestra.
What we are trying to do is help the younger ones have more opportunities to show themselves, which is the main difficulty for young conductors, that they do not have enough occasion to conduct the orchestra and to show what they can do. So that is the main purpose of this masterclass and project in the future.
This masterclass is part of the Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra's long-term project to nurture the musical talents of the next generation. The orchestra plans to continue trying to identify and nurture young talents over the course of next 10 years. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has warned that any military strike on his country will result in war across the Middle East.
The dire warning came as France joined the United States in saying it as concrete proof that the Assad regime carried out last month's devastating chemical weapons attack. Arirang reports.
The French intelligence service has drafted a 9-page report in which it says Syrian President Bashar al-Assad personally ordered last month's, quote, massive and coordinated chemical attack that killed hundreds. Prime Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault presented the report to French ministers and heads of parliamentary groups at an emergency meeting on Syria on Monday. Ayrault spoke of the need to back military action against the Syrian government.
President Hollande is working on persuading and bringing together a coalition as quickly as possible.
In an interview with French newspaper Le Figaro, President Assad said that if France does take part in foreign strikes against Syria, he will retaliate. Assad said, quote, if the policies of the French state are hostile to the Syrian people, the state will be their enemy, and said France will have to face the consequences. He added that military intervention could set off a regional war and described the Middle East as a tinderbox that would explode if any attack were launched. Despite the most dire warning yet, Western nations continue to ramp up their rhetoric against the Syrian regime. NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen said he has seen evidence that Syrian authorities used chemical weapons, adding it would send a dangerous signal to dictators if the world did not respond firmly. Over in Washington, Congress is set to vote next week on President Obama's proposal to authorize airstrikes against Syria. Senator John McCain said a vote against would be disastrous.
A rejection of that, a vote against that resolution by Congress, I think, would be catastrophic because it would undermine the credibility of the United States of America and the President of the United States. None of us want that.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has proposed sending a group of Russian lawmakers to the United States to discuss the situation with members of Congress and to persuade them to take a balanced stance on the issue before the vote next week. Yurian, Arirang News.
Is the U.S. going to intervene in Syria for the Assad regime's alleged use of chemical weapons against civilians? What are prospects that the U.S. Congress will give President Barack Obama's case for airstrikes the green light?
And to shed some light on this discussion and this issue, we are now joined live by Dr. Chang Jiang from the Asan Institute of Policy Studies. Thank you for joining us again.
Hello, Dr. Jiang. So, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said Sunday that hair and blood samples from first responders in East Damascus have tested positive for signatures of sarin. So can you tell us about this nerve agent, sarin?
Sarin nerve gas is prohibited, strongly prohibited weapon by the international norms and laws. For instance, Saddam Hussein used it against Iranian civilians during the Iran-Iraq War and also against the Kurds in the 90s. And like South Korea government, as a member of Chemical Weapon Convention, strongly condemned the use of sarin gas against the Syrian civilians this August.
Okay, last week it seemed like a U.S.-led military attack or intervention in Syria was imminent, only a matter of time. But then we have Obama seeking congressional approval, and some experts have said by doing this, President Obama has taken a step back from his initial aggressive approach. Why do you think that is so?
Like a unilateral airstrike on Syria can be quite burdensome for any government. And then, the second term of Obama administration's foreign policy is about pivoting to Asia, rebalancing Asia, and leading from behind, mainly due to the fatigue from Iraq and Afghanistan war. So, public opinions is not really supporting the possibility of another war. And also, like a limited airstrike will probably bring more, escalation. And also 2 years ago, Obama administration decided to join the military action in Libya as well, even though that was quite limited. So, Obama administration wanted to make sure that it was really, really cautious enough to decide to go to war, and also probably wanted to share responsibility with the Congress.
Right. So while President Obama and some U.S. Congress members have built a strong case for this airstrike against Syria, it seems like it won't be an easy sell, as you said. So what do you think will happen now?
Well, I don't know, probably half and half. We will hear the result of the vote about the airstrike, unilateral airstrike on Syria next week, around September 9th. But, well, Secretary of State Kerry already said that without, congressional authorization, the U.S. will take the military action on Syria. And he also said that, the history tells us that there are so many cases like, military action without congressional approval, including Kosovo, Iraq, and Somalia. So I think that we will see the airstrike on Syria by the United States soon.
Well, UN said no. The NATO is pretty much more or less saying no, but U.S. has a very strong ally right now. France said they are willing to join the U.S. in their attempt to intervene with the affairs in Syria. What are the nations are there? Could you name us a few countries that might be willing to join this coalition of the willing?
Some from the Arab League, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and probably Jordan and Qatar. They strongly condemn the Assad regime, and also called for more, military action and stronger response. And probably Turkey as well will strongly support the military action by the United States. And Saudi, UAE, and Turkey already declared that they will lend their military asset to the United States.
Wow, so it's not just France, but many other countries joining hands. So if the U.S. does intervene in Syria, do you think that could turn out to be a long, drawn-out war like the U.S. war in Iraq?
I think so, unfortunately, and there is a huge possibility of it. So in order not to repeat the Iraqi case, which is deep ethno-sectarian conflict, the international community with the opposition rebel groups should only focus on Assad and a small handful numbers of ruling elites, not really the majority of the elite. Usually in hereditary succession dictatorial regimes just like Syria and North Korea, many people were forced to join the party. So we should differentiate between the cohesive military core unit and other just general elite, so that we should not really punish and purge majority of people in the region.
So they need to plan ahead and make sure they do it with surgical precision and make sure they pinpoint the root of the problem and not affect everyone else with all the shrapnels and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Zhang. We look forward to having you back here again real soon.
Thank you.
It's time for weather. That means we turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. So Michelle, despite the cooler temperatures, the sun is still fairly strong during the peak hours.
Yes, Daniel, but apparently 15 minutes of sunshine a day is good for your skin and health. It's also quite windy outside, which helps relieving the heat.
That's right. Even though our daytime temperatures are still high, you don't see many people wearing light clothing.
That's because we only have to deal with the heat for a couple of hours a day now, since the temperature drops once the sun goes down. Tomorrow is going to be similar to today, being sunny to partly cloudy. However, we are once again expecting slight rain in Gangwon province. Taking a closer look at the forecast, Seoul will start off the morning at 16 and reach 29 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the cities in the south like Daegu and Busan will peak at 29 and 28 degrees respectively. Down onto Jeju Island, you'll see partly cloudy skies, which will ease up during the day. Meanwhile, Dokdo and Mangkumgang will be on the cooler side. Well, that's all I have for you today. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And that's all from us for this hour. Thank you for watching. As always, this has been Daniel Chen.
And I'm Kim Hyun-ji. Stay tuned to Arirang for more news coming up.